Hey friends, I hope that you are somehow watching this video today with someone else, not alone. Whether you're doing the lawn chair gathering or whether you've gathered with the people in your own household or whether you've called someone so that you can both watch it and then discuss together. I hope you're not just watching this on your own. You know how life gets overloaded? Like, uh, the check engine light is on in your car and you know you got to go get the oil changed, but you have no idea when you're going to get it in. And the flower beds need weeded, and your emails are backlogged, and you have no idea if you've responded to all of the texts that different people have sent you, and the grass needs mowed, and things at work have gotten pretty complicated, and they need you to come in this next weekend to cover for someone else, along with all of your other responsibilities. You still haven't heard back from your insurance agent, and oh, there's that dental bill that you need to get paid from last week, and you better pick up a birthday card and get it sent to your brother before this weekend. And the garage is a mess, and there's that book that you've been wanting to read but it's just sitting on your shelf unread, and somehow the dog keeps getting out. You're going to have to find the gap in the fence, and you got to get the dog to the vet sometime, and you need to find some time to sit down with the family budget and just make sure you're still afloat. And uh, yeah, at the end of the night, when you sit down, you're just so exhausted you haven't done it yet. Now, before COVID, it felt like life had enough balls that you had to juggle, that was enough. But then with COVID, all the challenges and complications, it's like life just keeps tossing another ball in, and you're trying to keep up as if you could juggle any number of balls. Does any of that sound familiar? Life becoming just overloaded. Have you ever felt like life is happening to you more than you are living life? So when when life becomes overloaded, it's not uncommon to use these small little moments that we have to chase what Brene Brown calls numbing agents, shadow comforts. It's just something to take the edge off, something to help you forget. So it's like, I'm just going to sit here and scroll my phone or eat some food or binge my favorite show because I have a little bit of time, or I'm going to buy something, or I'm going to play a game on my phone, or I'm going to just try to keep myself real busy. I'm going to do all the other things so I don't have to think about things. It's all kind of the same stuff. It's, I'm not feeling great about the way things are right now, and I'm not real happy with life, and I'm not real happy with who I've been or who I am. And in the middle of it all, it's like God gets squeezed out of life. And it's not that you wanted it to be that way. It's not like you chose for that to happen. It can feel like it happened to you, but life became overloaded and too many priorities and ambitions and schedules. And it's like God got squoze, which word is it? Out of life. So when that happens, is it enough to just say, well, I got to make some space in my life. Uh, I need to learn some self-discipline and rearrange some priorities, and I need to learn the value of saying no. Does that solve the whole thing? Like, I got to sit down with my calendar and figure this out. Those are worthy goals. They really are, and they can really help. But notice how those statements, like, I gotta make some space, I need to learn some self-discipline. I need to learn the value of no. Notice how those statements are all about eliminating something from your life. And there's a very real question. Does eliminating stuff from your life, does that fill your soul? If I eliminate things from my life so that I create some space, what am I going to fill that space with? Will I simply fill that new space with my old ways, with my old shadow comforts? That's the question. And that's why today we're talking about praying with our bodies. That's my favorite way that I've heard this spoken of. We're talking about biblical fasting, but I really like that phrase, praying with our bodies. This word fasting, it makes a lot of people think about skipping a meal or skipping a meal or two. So they might, think about someone who gives up coffee for Lent. And then the whole Lenten season, they're just talking about how much they're craving coffee. Like, oh, I can't wait until this is over and I can have my first latte. Is is that what fasting is all about? Well, the Gospel of Matthew, the Gospel of Mark, the Gospel of Luke, they all record this story. Jesus in the desert for 40 days, and Jesus is eating nothing. Jesus is fasting. But is not eating the point? Like, is it the point just, eliminate eating? So in the desert, Jesus created space in his life, created space in his body, his stomach. Uh, and so the first temptation that Jesus faces in the desert is to fill up that empty space. It's turn these stones into bread. When you're hungry, there are some rocks that really do look like a warm loaf of bread. And in a grander sense, when life becomes overwhelming, we definitely face this temptation. It is to treat our shadow comforts as if those things could truly sustain us. And so we really are tempted to pick up that thing that can't feed us, like phone or TV remote or whatever it is that we would fill that little space with. And we're tempted to treat it like it can feed us. So your first discussion question today, it's a little bit of a vulnerable one for a starter, but sorry, I guess we're jumping in. Uh, how have you been tempted to treat something that can't feed you like it can feed you? That's the question. Uh, like, what is a stone in your life that you are tempted to treat like bread? Something that just it can't feed you, but you are always tempted or often tempted to treat it like it can feed you. So go ahead and name a few of those. Pause the video, have that conversation. When Jesus is tempted to turn stones into bread, he reaches back to this story, the story of the people of Israel out in the desert for 40 years and how God provided for them, giving them bread, manna. And Jesus quotes an important line from that story. He says, "It is written." He's using God's words. "It is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God." So you notice how the temptation tries to get Jesus to focus on what he's eliminated from his life. Turn these stones into bread. It's what you don't have. And Jesus shifts the focus to what he is filling that empty space up with, which is the Word of God. Man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that comes from the mouth of God. He's focusing on what he does have. So, fasting is this way that we make room in our heart for God. It is praying with your body, it's letting your appetite for God be expressed through your body. Now, there are plenty of stories throughout the Bible of people who fasted. Moses on Mount Sinai, the people of Israel on the Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur's fast that they did once a year. David mourning the death of his good friend Jonathan and Jonathan's dad Saul. David praying as his infant son's life hung in the balance, the child that he had with Bathsheba. David praying for the healing of his enemies. Elijah fasting when Queen Jezebel is threatening his life. Esther and all of the Jewish people as their lives were on the line. Ezra and his crew praying for safe travels, fasting. Um, Nehemiah and the people of Israel confessing their sins. Daniel as a captive in Persia. The Anna the prophetess waiting to meet little baby Jesus. Saul or the Apostle Paul, as you may know him, on the road to Damascus 3 days after his encounter with Jesus. The early church fasted as a part of their worship and as they appointed leaders and elders, and then as they sent people out. And as you look at all those stories, they are much more descriptive than prescriptive. They're telling you what happened more than they are telling you this is the way to do this. But it brings us to the Sermon on the Mount that we've been going through because Jesus assumes that his disciples will fast. He says in the Sermon on the Mount, Matthew 6, when you fast, do not look somber as the hypocrites do, for they disfigure their faces to show others that they are fasting. Truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. But when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face, so that it will not be obvious to others that you are fasting, but only to your Father, who is unseen, and your Father, who sees what is done in secret, will reward you. Israel was an agrarian society, a farming society, and they were dependent upon the rains. And so, in the first century, there were many observant Jews who fasted regularly, publicly, and asking God for rain during the dry season. And it was never prescribed in the Old Testament to do this, but there were many observant Jews who on every Monday and every Thursday they would get out on the street somewhere public and they'd do this public fasting thing. And part of the gig was you make yourself look all disheveled. That was part of fasting. It's like I'm making myself look like a mourner so that I'm kind of sending out this message like, help me in my affliction. But in this case, it's not just me. I'm doing it for the sake of everyone else. But the entire thing turned into this like twisted badge of pride and honor. So imagine it. Think about this. So, what might people say if you were out on the street corner and you happen to be out there last week and you're doing the disheveled look and fasting and praying publicly, praying for rain, and now imagine if this week we had a good rain. Now, what's everyone going to say to you? They're going to say, hey, thanks for fasting last week. I saw what you did. Appreciate that. They're recognizing your devotion. They're recognizing the sacrifice that you made for all of us. And it was in this way that fasting became, it's like this powerful drug where you can't really wait for your next hit, your next fix. Like you can't wait for next Monday when people are going to walk by again and kind of give you a nod of respect, like thanks man, thanks for doing that. And it becomes this body version, this physical version of I'm fishing for a compliment. That's what it becomes. And to Jesus says it's all kinds of twisted up. That's what Jesus is getting at. Jesus wants us to pray with our bodies, but in a completely different way. So remember, fasting is I'm living on the words that come from the mouth of God, but that fasting is preparing us to do the hard work, to do the scary work, to do the sacrificial work of living in God's ways. So I'm I'm living on these words and it's getting me ready to respond to the words, to do something with the words. Because God's not interested in the religiosity of fasting. God makes that very clear through the prophets. Like the prophet Zechariah, God says through the prophet Zechariah, when you fasted and mourned for the past 70 years, was it really for me that you fasted? Like God's asking this question. And then God answers the question, rhetorical question at that, like with this contrast, God says, administer true justice, show mercy, and be compassionate to one another. Do not oppress the widow or the fatherless, the foreigner, immigrant, the poor. Do not plot evil against each other. So that's the way that God addresses it through Zechariah. The same message through the prophet Isaiah. God says, on the day of your fasting, you do as you please and exploit all your workers. Your fasting ends in quarreling and strife and in striking each other with wicked fists. You cannot fast as you do today and expect your voice to be heard on high. Is that what you call a fast? So then God goes on, is not this the kind of fasting I have chosen? To loosen the chains of injustice, to untie the cords of the yoke, to set the oppressed free and break every yoke. Is it not to share your food with the hungry, to provide the poor wanderer with shelter, when you see the naked to clothe them, and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Then your light will break forth like the dawn, and your healing will quickly appear. Then your righteousness will go before you, and the glory of the Lord will be your rear guard. Then you will call, and the Lord will answer. You will cry for help, and he will say, here am I. If you do away with the yoke of oppression, with the pointing finger and malicious talk, and if you spend yourselves in behalf of the hungry, and satisfy the needs of the oppressed, then your light will rise in the darkness, and your night will become like the noonday. The Lord will guide you always. He will satisfy your needs in a sun-scorched land, and will strengthen your frame. The life, the worship that God desires for us involves serving God, serving others with our bodies. It's spending yourself on behalf of the hungry and loosening the chains of injustice and clothing the naked and providing shelter for the wanderer and not turning away from your own flesh and blood. And that is all physical stuff. That's stuff you do with your body. So, how do we reset our heart towards God's ends when our life has become completely overloaded with all of the things and God has just gotten squeezed out of life? How do we reset our heart? It's by praying with our body. It's I'm living on the words that come from the mouth of God. I'm fasting. It's not just I'm eliminating things from my life and I got to cut some things out and I got to say no to this and to that. It's I'm filling up that space in my life with the Word of God. So, your final discussion question today. When God gets squeezed out of life, does it work? Is it enough to simply try to squeeze God back into life? Is that enough? Why or why not? So go ahead, pause the video, have that conversation. Love your friends.